You know, the thing about Bible-believing Christians is that, we understand that there is a fallen nature of man. When people want to be tyrants, one of the first things they do is take away the guns. Hey, once again, I want to welcome you today to another episode of Uncensored Pilgrims. I'm Marty McLain, along with
Paul Price. I like how you emphasized uncensored there.
Uncensored, because you may not know this, but we did get censored on YouTube for our last podcast. But hey, we'll find a way around that, even if it means going to Rumble.
Yeah, I've started the long process of gradually uploading onto Rumble. I'm not sure whether it's... I don't know how many people are going to see it there, but...
Yeah, well, you got to... You give it the old college try, and just hopefully you went to the right college, right? And I think we did. We both went to University of Georgia, so I think we're okay.
Well, there you go. And I think I would really... In the past, we've been saying, well, just subscribe wherever you want. Well, I would say now, subscribe on the audio version, and that way... Even if YouTube censors it, you'll still be aware, and you'll be able to listen to our episodes. So probably go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever your preferred podcast distribution service may be.
Oh, podcast distribution service.
PDS. And I know I talked about this last week, but another real quick reminder, if you happen to be listening to this episode before the evening of Tuesday, January the 17th, 2023 at 7:30 p.m., there's going to be a live stream debate that I'm going to participate in at the Standing for Truth YouTube channel on the question, is there evidence for the existence of God? And we'd love to have you there watching, listening, and even submitting questions for the discussion afterward. And me and Marty are going to talk about that debate after it's happened the following week on the podcast. So hope to have you there. And also send us an email to uncensoredpilgrims@gmail.com if you got questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. I've been waiting on an email, haven't got one yet. So
okay, y'all, somebody email Paul so he can get that email. He may put it on the wall or something. Yeah. Hey, today we're going to talk about gun control. We're going to talk about the Second Amendment. We're going to talk about all that entails. And, what does that mean for a Christian? When I was first in the ministry, I didn't have a gun. I kind of didn't know if I was supposed to have a gun being a pastor. I just didn't know how to feel about it. I grew up hunting. Grew up, had a 410, had a 12-gauge shotgun. But then, I even lived in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Memphis, Tennessee, and did not have a gun. And as time has progressed, you get married, you have children. And needless to say, I do have several guns now. But we're going to talk about it today, Paul, about what is it for a Christian to have a gun? I mean, should Christians have guns? Should we use guns for self-defense? Why is it that we even have the Second Amendment here in the United States? And by way of the Second Amendment, I'll read this from the actual Constitution. It says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, a lot of people have debates over what does it mean shall not be infringed, and, hey, what does it mean to bear? Some would like to say, well, you can have one at your house, but you can't have one on your person. We see that the Supreme Court recently, with the New York decision, said no, citizens do have a right to carry a gun. And speaking of which, did you know that Georgia is now a constitutional carry state?
I heard that, and I actually, for a long time, did not know that was the case.
It just happened recently, this past year, back in April, I think, is when it happened.
Because I had gone through the process of getting a concealed carry permit prior to that, and apparently, as I understand it, in Georgia, you no longer have to have that.
So. Right. I also have a permit to carry.
Yeah.
I get it because my daughter's an actress, and there was, there were some weirdos out there, and so we felt like, just in case, if I needed a company or somewhere, that I would be packing.
Yeah.
And so I never really had to do that, but I do have a permit to carry. But now you don't have to have one. You do have to undergo a background check, though, in order to
purchase one.
Yes. And so here we go. Did you know? This is something interesting. Speaking of gun control, Second Amendment. Back in 1982, Kennesaw, Georgia, the city council there, they unanimously passed an ordinance requiring households to own at least one firearm with ammunition. And the purpose was, quote, to protect the safety, security, and general welfare of the city and its inhabitants. Now, they say, this is from an article, that Kennesaw's ordinance was a heartfelt assertion of Second Amendment gun rights, a principled and legislative rebuttal to a law passed earlier that year in Morton Grove, Illinois, which banned guns within the city limits. So Kennesaw said, okay, you're going to ban guns in the city limits. We're going to pass an ordinance where we're going to require homeowners to own a gun and have ammunition. Now, it's interesting that there was some litigation. It says the American Civil Liberties Union challenged Kennesaw's law as unconstitutional, but the federal court let it stand, although the city did add a clause exempting conscientious objectors, criminals, the mentally disabled, and people who could not afford a gun. So, and Kennesaw does have a rather low rate of violent crimes, home break-ins. At least they did when this article was written. So what do you think about that, Paul? You think, would you like to live in a town that requires citizens to own a gun?
I would love to.
Okay.
I think it's a deterrent. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you know that people have a gun in their home, and you're a bad guy, you're a criminal, chances are you're probably not going to want to break into that home because you don't want to get shot.
Well, definitely not if you think there's a chance somebody's home.
Yeah. It's interesting. Even this past week, my wife, Stephanie, wanted me to go back over some stuff about using a gun. Mm-hmm. And we had just some situation was arising that felt like she really needed to learn back up on how to use the gun. So, I got a .38, a revolver, got hollow point bullets, and, we're going back through loading, unloading, all that stuff, gun safety. And I remember I told her, I said, look, you shoot somebody in the torso with this, you're going to kill them. Yeah. And that's the thing about guns, is that they're very unforgiving.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get shot with a gun, you got shot with a gun.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the intent was, whether it's accidental or on purpose. So guns are very serious.
Yeah.
You got to be very serious when you handle a gun. You always assume that a gun is loaded. Right?
Yeah.
That's always a very safe assumption to make. I don't think people in other parts of the country would understand this, but I remember when I was in high school, they let a lot of us get out of school one day. It was a school-sponsored event where we went to a hunter safety course. We learned gun safety as part of, being in school.
Yeah.
So we
that's a good thing, I would say.
That's a good thing, but I think some people in some parts of the country would be like, that would probably make them nervous.
Well, I think the media especially has kind of conditioned people, and even more so in other countries outside the U.S., to really have that feeling of, guns are unsafe and they should only be handled by professionals, by which they mean the government. The government. And therein lies the problem. We're gonna kind of hit on that because, you have a lot of well-meaning people. There's some Christians who are big proponents of gun control, but there are a lot of Christians who own guns. As a matter of fact, let me read something to you. This is from an article I've got here from Christianity Today. It says, according to a 2017 Pew Research Center data analyzed for Christianity Today, white evangelicals are more likely than members of other faith groups or the average United States citizen to own a gun. 41% do compared to 30% of Americans overall. A majority of white evangelicals who own a handgun carry it with them, 65% versus 57% of all gun owners, because they view it as a safety precaution. White evangelicals are more likely to believe most places should allow citizens to carry guns, 46% versus 35% of all
gun owners. So basically, the biggest demographic of, I don't want to say pro-guns, but pro-Second Amendment people would, it looks like, be a bunch of white evangelicals.
And why? What would race have to do with that?
I don't.
And to a certain extent,
I don't know.
what does religion even have to do with it?
Paul, you always ask me these questions in which I don't know if I'm supposed to answer or not, man.
Yeah.
Or, you know.
I don't know. I don't know what, being evangelical as opposed to being what? Mainline is the word, right?
Yeah, I think the tendency, mainline, they're basically liberal for the most part. I mean, the mainline denominations have gone liberal for the most part. And the more liberal you are, the more you are for
gun
control.
I think this is yet another case of correlation rather than causation.
There we go.
I mean, I think if you're outside those demographics, then you're more likely to be a liberal, and therefore you're less likely to want to have a gun, because liberals in general are anti-private gun ownership,
right?
Because they're pro-big government, and they're in favor of the government basically taking care of us. They think, oh well, I'm going to call the police. You know, if somebody's invading my home, I'm going to call the police because that's the police job to handle. But the problem is, how long is that going to take for the police to get there?
Yeah, I read somewhere it's like 10 to 15 minutes, and usually what they'll do by the time they get to your house is that they'll file a report and clean up the house.
Yeah, clean up the mess.
Yeah, they'll clean up the mess. I mean, so a lot of times you do not have a panic room. Y'all don't have a panic room, do you?
I think every room is a panic room.
Every
in this house.
room is your. He has a panic house, man.
Yeah.
I don't know what Yeah, some people have these, panic rooms behind the bookshelf or something. They go.
So it's
in,
like a place to go hide, basically.
A place to go hide until people get everything out of your house that they want, and then they leave.
Okay.
I don't know.
Like a safe space.
Yeah, there's actually a movie about that one time. Somebody had a panic room. Now, I'm not, I know somebody, I've got a relative that has a panic room. I know where it's at. And I often thought, the people that build this house, your workers know where it's at too. So they're going to, if they want to come back and do something to your house, they know where your panic room is. But
so a panic room isn't a place where you store valuables. It's just a place where you run and hide.
Yeah, I think some people want a panic room to get out of the way of danger.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting. We say the view of a lot of white evangelicals is pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment. But do you consider Joe Rogan a white evangelical?
Well, I think he's white.
He's white.
I wouldn't call him an evangelical.
No, I've tried to listen to his show before, and I just I learned some. I don't know if I was learning new words or hearing words I hadn't heard in years. But anyway, I felt like it was probably best I didn't listen to a lot of his show.
Yeah.
But anyway, here's what he says about gun control and all that type of stuff. He says, "What is the answer? Is the answer to take everyone's guns? Well, they're not going to give their guns up. Only criminals are going to have guns. It's not going to be a good situation. So if you turn in your guns, well, good people turn in their guns, but criminals won't." Here's what he says. It says, Rogan added that he doesn't think it's smart, quote, to take all the guns away from people and give all the power to the government. We see how they are with an armed populace. They still have a tendency towards totalitarianism. He said, and it's a natural inclination when you're a person in power to try to hold more power and acquire more power. The thing about Bible-believing Christians is that, we understand that there is a fallen nature of man, of humanity. And you have to keep people in check.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just all of a sudden I'll trust in the goodness of man.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of badness out there.
Yes, exactly. And the founding fathers of this republic,
right?
They understood that as well, even though a lot of them were not actual Christians. They had enough agreement with the Judeo-Christian worldview that they understood that people cannot be trustful of government, and that the more power you give to the government, the more they're going to take away the rights of the people. So they understood that, and that's why they formed a Republican form of government.
Right.
And I say Republican not as a political party, but as the nature of our government.
Right, we are a republic.
It was not designed to be a democracy because in a democracy, you've got mob rule. Anybody, if you get enough people to agree, anything could happen.
It's true.
But in a republic, we have a constitution and we have a form of government that is not subject to the whims of a majority vote. And that's important.
Right. And so, we understand that, you get the right to bear arms, and that leads to where you can have self-defense, and also it kind of keeps the government in check. Theoretically. And I know there are some that say, well, you can't take on an M1 tank or, a F-16 with the
No, you can't. But on the other hand, how many M1A1 tanks do they have compared to the number of people in the United States that own a gun?
Right.
Not enough.
And here's something with that is that if you look throughout history, one of the things that tyrants try to do is they want to take away the guns.
Yeah.
Mao did that in communist China. He has a quote that says, quote, "All political power comes from the barrel of a gun. The Communist Party must command all guns.
Yeah.
That way no guns can ever be used to command the party."
Exactly.
And, even Hitler, of course, took the guns away, especially from the Jews. I think he got the list from the Weimar Republic.
Okay.
They had acquired list of gun owners, and it somehow got turned over when Hitler took power. They found the list, and anyway, it made it really easy. If you have that's why a lot of people don't want a national registry of
course not
guns, because they know that, hey, if somebody
goes in the wrong hands,
so they know who has what.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. That I would be against that.
Well, they say that when Castro took over Cuba, that he took the guns.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to him ascending into power, when he was against the regime that was in power, that they distributed guns to the citizens that would fight with him. Then when he finally got power, then he said, okay, all right, turn in the guns. If you don't turn in the guns, you're going to face, I think, the Revolutionary Council or whatever, some kangaroo trial. So everybody knew, what, we better turn our guns in. Of course, Chavez took away the guns in Venezuela.
Maybe you can tell me, because I don't know the state of all gun laws all over the world, but is there really anywhere else in the world that respects the right to keep and bear arms that outside the United States? Is there anybody that has the freedom to defend themselves except United States citizens?
I don't think there's anywhere that I can find that I know of. Maybe somebody else can enlighten us.
Somebody send me an email.
But I know a lot of your industrialized nations, your European nations. I know because of shooting in Scotland quite a few decades ago, the United Kingdom, they changed their gun laws. They were confiscated or bought back a lot of guns. Of course, that happened down in New Zealand. It happened in Australia.
I know Australia is really bad about guns. As far as Australians have basically been brainwashed to think guns are totally evil.
Right.
And guns are not allowed. And then I've even been told that in Australia it's dangerous to use a gun to defend yourself because you'll go to jail.
Yeah.
Even if it was a legitimate case of self-defense, they'll still throw you in jail for it.
Yeah. And so there's no in the industrialized world. I don't think there's any other nation that has a Second Amendment like what we have. I read somewhere recently we have, and I don't know if this is accurate, but estimation of 390 million guns in America.
Mm-hmm.
There's more than one per citizen because we have 330 million people or something like that.
I always thought it was 350. But,
okay, let's say.
But that's got to be going up, right?
Yeah. So here's a quote from one of Hitler's main guys, Heinrich Himmler.
Mm-hmm.
He said, quote, "Ordinary citizens don't need guns as having guns doesn't serve the state."
Yeah.
So, you have, when people want to be tyrants, one of the first things they do is take away the guns. And in some of these nations, it always follows on the heels of a mass shooting. Mass shootings are horrible. They're terrible events. They're sick individuals, demented individuals. Those are terrible things that happen. But in like New Zealand, I think in Australia, and United Kingdom, the big gun confiscation happened after a mass shooting.
It's always easier to convince people to give up their rights if you have this, look how evil guns are. Somebody used it in a bad way and killed people, so you should give up your right to have a gun.
Right.
Unfortunately, that sways people.
And it does. And it does sway people. And you can understand why that would sway people. Because, I mean, you see the carnage. And it's like, man, that doesn't need to happen. But what happens is that you give the power to the state, and you give the power, like in our country, the bad guys.
Wait till you see the carnage once nobody else except the government has any guns.
Yeah.
Look at that. Like in the 20th century, a guy, probably my favorite pastor that we listen to on the internet and stuff, his name is Dr. Phil Fernandez out of the Institute of Biblical Defense out of Washington.
All right.
And he has a good quote that I like to mention, which is that in these totalitarian governments, as a citizen, you're better off during times of war than you are during peacetime.
All right.
Because at least during wartime, the government arms the populace and distributes guns to people for the purpose of, fighting the war. But at least then you've got a way to defend yourself.
Right.
During peacetime, you have no way to defend yourself.
Yeah.
Because they confiscate all the guns.
One of the craziest things that happened recently is that some of the same people that wanted to, quote, defund the police also wanted to confiscate guns.
Oh, yeah, and that whole thing was a giant sham. You know all those people those politicians that were saying defund the police, they've all gone back on that now that they're in power.
Yeah, and a lot of
now that they're controlling
even when
the
they were
police,
saying
not
defund
so much.
the police, at the same time, they were paying for their own personal security.
Of course.
They had people guarding them with guns.
Yeah.
But the normal people can't afford that. And so anyway, should Christians, Paul, let's get to this question. Should Christians own a gun? Should Christians, is it okay for a Christian to engage in self-defense?
Yeah, I would definitely say absolutely yes.
Okay.
Even though I know there are some, groups and some people that think that Christianity teaches pacifism or complete, lack of self-defense. I don't agree with that. There are some verses that some people might take out of context, like when Jesus says to turn the other cheek.
Right.
But in context, that was a discussion of, a personal slight or an insult,
Right.
And a slap across the cheek, that's not an attack to harm, to really do major bodily harm to you. It's just simply, basically an insult.
Right.
And so it's telling Christians, don't return evil for evil. Don't lash back out at people who insult you or try to anger you.
Right.
That is true. But defending yourself from a lethal attack is a whole other.
So if somebody comes to mug you or somebody comes to attack you on the street, you're not just supposed to stand there and say, "Let me know when it's over"?
No, I wouldn't advise it. It won't end up well for you.
Okay, so
certainly not.
So I don't have to do that.
No, and in the New Testament there are examples where you can see even late in Jesus' ministry, at the very end of his ministry, his disciples were carrying swords.
Yeah, he told them in Luke 22:36.
Yeah.
Sell what you got and buy a sword.
Yeah, but not only that. I mean, not only did they do that, but they were carrying them on their persons because when they came to arrest Jesus, what did Peter do?
Yeah, and that's where Jesus said, "Put your sword up. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword."
Yeah, but so some people would take that verse out of context.
They would take that out of context.
Put it up. Well, wait a second. How long had they been with Jesus? And Jesus didn't have a problem with them carrying it on their person?
Right.
So clearly he wasn't teaching that self-defense is prohibited. But it wasn't Jesus. The whole thing about that is that Jesus' purpose when the first time he came was not to come and initiate a military revolution against Rome.
Right.
So that's exactly what the Jews of that time expected Messiah to do.
Yeah.
And so they expected, let's pull out our swords and let's start the fight right now.
Exactly.
And that's what Peter tried to do right there.
And that was the wrong way. And so if we are able to defend ourselves, like I think it's Esther 8:11, where the Jews were allowed to defend themselves.
Okay.
On Purim, when Mordecai worked it out with, they put Haman to death, and Haman had it arranged where Jews were going to be attacked on a certain day, but then they were given permission of self-defense. and they were able to defend themselves. Also, I think you were going to mention a passage in Exodus 22.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of the go-to passage if you're going to look at the law of Moses, which is, there's only been one time in history that God actually gave us a prescribed list of civil laws for a nation to follow. And this would be one of those laws where it says, Exodus 22:2, if a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. So what it's saying is there's a difference between if you strike and you kill someone who's a thief trying to steal from you. If you do that in the middle of the night, there's a difference between that and doing it in the daytime. Why would that be? I mean, what do you think the difference is?
You're not acting out of impulse.
Well, yeah, if it's nighttime, you can't see clearly. You're not sure what the person's intentions are.
Right.
So you have to do it to defend yourself.
Right.
And that's the difference between that and daytime. You can see clearly. You're probably not being woken up out of a sleep. And so you have the ability to say, oh, this is just a person who's trying to steal goods rather than someone who's threatening my life.
Right. So if he was coming in here and taking your Nintendo 64.
Yeah. If he came and tried to steal my Nintendo 64, even if I might want to kill him.
I don't think he'd know how to work a Nintendo 64.
No, but he could fetch some money for it on eBay or something,
okay.
Right? So, but no, that would not be moral. So, justice is an appropriate punishment for an appropriate crime, right? Like to have the punishment fit the crime. I don't think, killing someone for stealing your Nintendo 64 is an appropriate.
Yeah.
The punishment doesn't fit the crime there. So, no, that wouldn't be appropriate.
Right. I agree. Now, if there was something very controversial that I think it was back in 2015. John Piper had responded to something that had happened at Liberty University with Jerry Falwell Jr. Now I'll tell you right off the bat, I'm not the biggest John Piper fan. I'm just not. I mean, I know some people are, John Piper 316 or whatever. I mean, they just
John Piper 316.
They just really like John Piper. I mean, they just do. But I'm just, I was thinking about this. I thought, the only minister that I really thought overly highly of, if I can say overly highly, can I put those two together? That. Okay,
that's two adverbs.
Yeah, it was. I'm very adverbial. Was Adrian Rogers?
Okay,
and I don't know. He just had this booming voice. I think maybe some Seminole Indian in him. He's just a very imposing presence. And
I'm going to show my ignorance here. What time period is he from?
He 70s, 80s, 90s. Okay. I mean, he's dead now.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's president of Southern Baptist Convention. He'd be on Air Force One, I think, with George H.W. Bush, the older one. Anyway, but he was just a good man.
Yeah.
And he could preach extremely well. He just had his booming voice. And I remember one day I was at Shoney's.
Okay.
And I was at the soup and salad bar.
Shoney's.
Yeah.
I haven't been in a Shoney's in a decade or more.
I don't think anybody's been in a Shoney's in a decade or more. But I was at a soup and salad bar, and all of a sudden I looked at it, I was face to face with Dr. Rogers.
Oh, really?
You know what I said? Hey, Dr. Rogers. I mean, that's just how it came out. I mean, it just took me by surprise.
Yeah.
And I was face to face. So anyway, I understand there's some folks that, for whatever reason, you're in their bandwagon or whatever. I mean, we don't need to put anybody up on a pedestal and all that, because everybody's feet are made of clay and all that. But so I know a lot of people like John Piper. I know we have some people that listen to our podcast that are probably you either John Piper, Roddy Piper. I mean, you're gonna like.
I didn't know if you were about to use the C word or not.
No. What's that?
Calvinist.
Calvinist, yeah. Well, he is a Calvinist, but So you got all
We can
the
ruffle
pipers.
some feathers on that maybe another day.
Yeah, we'll do that another day. But we can even have the Pied Piper. But anyway, this is John Piper, and he was responding to something that Jerry Falwell Jr. said at Liberty University, and I'll just kind of read a little bit of this article that Piper actually put out. Of course, it's from Desiring God. He said, quote, "As Chancellor of Bethlehem College and Seminary, I want to send a different message to our students and to the readers of Desiring God than Jerry Falwell Jr. sent to the students of Liberty University in a campus chapel service on December 4th, 2015.
Mm-hmm.
For the sake of the safety of his campus and in view of terrorist activity, President Falwell encouraged the students to get permits to carry guns. After implying that he had a gun in his back pocket, he said, quote, I just want to take this opportunity to encourage all of you to get your permit. We offer a free course, and let's teach them a lesson if they ever show up here, unquote.
Yeah.
Now, he says he clarified on December 9th that the policy at Liberty now includes permission to carry guns. So, anyway, he said, Piper continues, said, my main concern in this article is with the appeal to students that stirs them up to have the mindset, let's all get guns and teach them a lesson if they come here. The concern is the forging of a disposition in Christians to use lethal force, not as policemen or soldiers, but as ordinary Christians in relation to harmful adversaries. So that's kind of how he starts out his article. And I'll just be honest with you, I don't speak for John Piper, and John Piper does not need me to speak for him. But I would venture to say, based upon how this article went down,
Yeah.
he would probably wish he had never written it. and here's why. He gives he numbers reasons, why Christians basically don't, for the most part, don't need to own guns, and how we need to be seeking peace and everything. And so number 8 says, quote, a natural instinct is to boil the issue down to the question, can I shoot my wife's assailant? So if somebody's assaulting your wife, can you shoot them? And here's what he said. He gives, goes into the, how this is presented, discussing the issue here. But he says, quote, I do not know what I would do before the situation presents itself with all the innumerable variables of factors. And I would be very slow to condemn a person who may choose different from me. Wow.
Oh, well, to me, if you don't know in advance what you would do, you haven't thought it out, have you? And you're probably going to sit there and freeze and hesitate and do nothing.
Well, here's the deal.
In the situation.
I think I've got 2 daughters, and they're both married. And before they got married, if their husbands to be would come to me, and I would ask them, okay, my daughter's being assaulted, and you come home, she's being assaulted. What are you going to do? And if they say, well, I have to take several variables into consideration to, I want to make much of Jesus in this situation. And,
maybe preach the gospel a little bit.
I would say,
first.
dude, you need to find you another woman. I mean, the natural thing, if you came home and somebody's assaulting your wife, I'm going to do whatever I have to do. I mean, if I have a gun, I'm gonna have a gun. I'm gonna use a gun. If I have a bat, I'm gonna use a bat. I mean, I'm gonna protect my wife. I mean, it's just a natural inclination.
Bayonet.
And maybe after a guy's in jail or something, I can go share the gospel with them.
Yeah.
But at that moment, you want to,
You have to act fast, and you have to act to protect innocent life.
Right.
Not
and I think
sit there and
Piper
think
kinda
about, what would Jesus do in this situation?
He kind of got he just did not present himself well in that. And like I say, Piper's got some good stuff out there. I've read some, I'm not a anti John Piper. I mean, I think he's got some good stuff out there, but there was a lot of scathing response that he received.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of scathe. I mean, you can. Here's an article: a response to John Piper: why gun ownership is good and biblical.
Yeah.
Another one: why should Christians use guns? And these guys are, just kind of, his reasoning was not well laid out.
Yeah.
And I like I say, we probably have some podcasts that we wish, later on looking back, we'd say, well, why did I say that? Or I wish I had done that. Or I wish I would have said that differently. I mean, anytime you put something out there for public consumption, it can come back to give you heartburn.
Yeah.
So that's just the nature of it. But anyway.
But ultimately, I think it's really clear morally that because we just talked about Exodus, it's very clear that there's not a guilt for if someone gets killed in the process of self-defense.
Right.
So that's, to me, the law of Moses is a picture of God's perfect morality. Now, it is couched in a specific context for specific people at a specific time.
Right.
So that's why there's some ceremonial laws. There are laws, I'm not advocating that we necessarily stone people, for example.
Oh, no.
In the modern day.
No.
So there are, ways that law is not applicable in certain ways.
Exactly.
But it does lay out God's perfect morality in that snapshot of time, how he applied it to that nation. And I think you can derive things from that are universally applicable.
Yeah.
And so self-defense is not a sin or evil.
Yeah, and carrying a gun is not wrong if you have a clear conscience. Now, if you do not have a clear conscience about that, whatever's not in faith is sin.
Exactly.
So if your conscience is not clear about carrying a gun, then you don't need to.
If it wasn't wrong for the disciples of Jesus to carry a sword, then it's also equally not wrong for us to carry a gun today. It's the same concept.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been told this before about our church, that if anything ever happened in our church, just to hit the ground, because we have so many people in church that are packing heat.
Yeah, hit the ground.
Yeah, they just get down. It'll be resolved.
Yeah.
You just get down, and some places, like the New York law they just passed. They originally had a law that got struck down by the Supreme Court several months ago that basically said if you could only carry a gun if you had valid reasons for doing so. And you'd have to prove your reasons for doing so. But then the Supreme Court said, no, that's a right that people have. They don't have to prove that right. And
well, in the United States, in theory at least, the highest law of our land is supposed to be our Constitution. And you read the Second Amendment. It states that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And there are a couple of court cases where the Supreme Court has upheld that right. Mm-hmm. In 2008, there was the District of Columbia versus Heller.
Okay.
And the Supreme Court affirmed that the Second Amendment guarantees the individual right to keep and bear arms.
Right.
Okay, I mean, we didn't need the Supreme Court to tell us that because that's what the Constitution says, but it's good that they affirmed it.
Right.
And then there's another court case that came out in 2010, McDonald versus Chicago. Mm-hmm. And in that case, they affirmed that it doesn't matter where you live in the United States, local governments or state governments cannot overturn our constitutional rights either.
Right.
And that's based on the 14th Amendment.
Okay.
So no matter where you live in the United States, your legal right is to bear arms. Now, unfortunately, in the news this past week, they just were talking about how the state of Illinois has banned assault rifles outright.
Yeah.
Now, that is an infringement of the constitutional rights of the people who live in Illinois. I hope something comes of it. I hope it's not allowed to stand.
Boy, that assault rifle issue, that's a hot button issue there. I mean, people have handguns and then have assault rifles, and that's...
Well, I don't even like that phrase, that term, assault rifle, because it makes it sound like it's only for the use of attacking or assaulting, as in it's not defensive.
Yeah.
So that it's a smear just to call it an assault rifle.
The number of people I know that own assault rifles, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, well, good.
I mean, you'd be surprised. You would be surprised who all
the
law-abiding. They just have one, but they're law-abiding, and they own assault rifles.
Well, we hit on this earlier, but the reason why our Constitution guarantees our right to own a weapon and to bear that arm is not merely, it's certainly not just for hunting. That's certainly not it.
You're exactly right.
And it's also not just so we can defend ourselves from a home invasion.
Right.
It is to maintain the power of the people as supreme over a tyrannical government.
Right.
That is the idea there. Now,
and people can't get past that.
But the problem is, in practice, I don't think that we are seeing that is how things are shaking out in this country. What we saw in 2020 was that unelected officials could tyrannically shut down the whole nation, including churches, and forbid people to even go worship on Sundays against their will. And this armed, quote-unquote, armed populace stood by and allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
So the idea that an armed populace is not going to... I mean, I do believe there are, if the government went far enough, fast enough, they might be able to push people so far that maybe they would do something. But I think what tyrannical governments know is that if you just do it slowly enough and in a stepwise fashion...
That's right. You can take a lot of rights away from the people.
Yes.
Incremental.
Yes.
That's why people, a lot of people don't want to, or say, no, we don't want to give it the ARs, the assault rifles, because they know that that's not where it stops.
Of course, it never stops.
And people, and they will tell you that they want more than just the assault rifles. Look what Justin Trudeau is doing up in Canada. I mean, he's one category after next with the confiscation of guns. And so
it doesn't even stop with guns. In the UK, they're now outlawing chef's knives as well.
Because a lot of people are using those knives like crazy. Here's something I like that the Supreme Court in this decision that they had not too long ago pertaining to the law in New York. It says the majority of justices held that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to carry a handgun for self-defense outside the home, and that good cause requirements such as the one implemented by New York are unconstitutional because they prevent law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising this right in public.
Yeah.
So what the legislature in New York then did is that they passed another law called the Concealed Carry Improvement Act, where they limit now the places where you can actually carry a gun. So, I mean, there's all these places, that they list. You cannot carry a gun here.
Yeah, but
here.
That even is true that's true across the country. Corporations, companies are allowed to put up signs saying you're not allowed to have a gun. And to me...
advertising. In a bad way.
Maybe, but to me, I think that is still an infringement of our rights.
Yeah, and
especially if it's an essential place where you need to go, like a grocery store.
A lot of the mass shootings actually happen in gun-free zones.
Of course, yeah.
And so and there's so many. You can look every year. They have a list of how a good guy with a gun saves lives.
Yeah,
and because people are able to carry guns. They are able to use them in certain situations. Now, let me just say, guns are dangerous. Yeah. Okay, they are very, very dangerous. Guns.
It's not a toy.
Guns make me nervous.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. Guns make me nervous, and when I know a relative of mine has a gun, or I know a relative of mine carries a gun, it makes me nervous. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I shouldn't lie to you anyway, Paul.
No, I would hope not.
Okay. But it makes me nervous when a relative has when they carry a gun, and I know they carry a gun, because I know that guns are unforgiving.
Yeah.
There's a finality that happens with that bullet.
Yeah.
And you got to be you cannot have a cavalier attitude when it comes to guns. You got to be very sober. You've got to be clear-headed. You've got to have wise judgment. You need to have a gun course.
Yeah.
You need to know how to handle a gun. And so guns make me nervous, but I'm all for the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
And, I have guns, and my wife knows how to use a gun.
Yeah.
And there are certain safety aspects of owning a gun. And
it's a responsibility.
It is a massive responsibility. So I don't want anybody to think that we're cavalier about this.
I had a guy tell me one time, He would never own a gun because he saw statistics that gun ownership increased your likelihood of dying from suicide.
Huh. Okay. All right.
What do you think about that?
He didn't trust himself.
I guess if you don't trust yourself, then stay away from the gun.
I tell you what, there's some people that need to stay away from guns. They don't need to trust themselves with the state of mind they're in.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, guns are. It's not wrong to if you have a clear conscience about it. I don't think there's anything wrong with a Christian owning a gun. I don't think there's anything wrong with a Christian carrying a gun. But it's a massive responsibility.
Yeah.
And you need to be careful. And you always assume that a gun's loaded.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the guns out of the reach of children. You need to do that. And it's unfortunately, this is a fallen world.
Yeah.
And we have people in this world that do things that are wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth saying that guns are not safe. They're dangerous, especially if not handled properly. But not having guns can also be unsafe. So we don't live in a safe world. There is no...
I think that's what people don't get past.
They don't understand, we don't live in a safe world.
This is not a safe world.
So disarming yourself because you're afraid of guns may not be the smartest move.
Yeah.
You may come out to need that to defend yourself sometime.
Yeah.
So
and even with Piper's article, if I'm not mistaken, he said he would not. He lives in Minneapolis, and he would not advocate somebody owning a gun. And but somebody
does he advocate them being outlawed and confiscated, or just?
I don't know about that,
yeah.
but that's his personal thing,
yeah.
and I don't think he's like saying, nobody should have guns or anything like that. But he's kind of saying that from his point of view, he obviously doesn't feel like he needs to have a gun. He doesn't feel like, and the reason why I bring him up is that he was so outspoken about it.
Right.
He entered into the arena with it,
yes.
In response to what Jerry Falwell Jr., and that just kind of, that puts stuff out there for discussion with that he said. And like I say, some people really like Piper, and he does have some good stuff. Don't Waste Your Life is a great book, and I understand how he's ministered to a lot of people, but that was just the reasoning in that article about guns just was not. I don't think that was his best work.
Right.
If I can just let me just put it like that.
Sure.
So Paul, you do have guns.
Yeah.
And that's not just when you're in a tank top, right?
I don't want to see me in a tank top.
Okay, I didn't know the sun's out. Sun's out, guns out. I didn't know if you were like that all the time around the house or what. Yeah.
I mean, no, I have some, and I like to go to the range from time to time. It's I'd like to go to a range where you could shoot. I think it'd be fun to be able to target shoot like tin cans and stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of don't like shooting a paper target because it's not very satisfying. It's just like a little hole and that's it. There's just nothing to
You ever go
that.
skeet shooting?
I like doing that.
That's fun. I like
that's
skeet
more
shooting.
satisfying.
Yeah. I like that. That's fun. Like I said, I've got several guns, and I'll be honest with you. Of the guns I've bought in the last 8 to 10 years, I haven't shot any of them.
Huh.
Even when I go skeet shooting, I shoot, double barrel that they have there at the skeet range.
Huh.
But I haven't shot the guns I own. I haven't shot them in 10 years.
Huh.
I just don't, like I say, I've got them. Guns make me nervous.
Yeah.
I'm not but I know how to use them.
Yeah.
And I'm not the type of guy I'm just going to go shoot my gun.
It's getting hard to even get ammo for guns, to be honest.
Yeah, well, you have to.
That might be a backdoor way that the government's trying to do some type of gun control.
Well, they did try to do it one time with the what was it? The certain component that was in the bullets that they were trying to make it an EPA issue, and to try to limit and how you could get your ammunition.
Huh.
But that is always a way to limit it. Is that you make it where you can't find any bullets.
Yeah.
Can't find any shells. So, we unfortunately live in a world where sometimes you have to have deterrent.
Let me ask you this question, since we're talking about legality and constitution and all that. Would you be in favor of the government allowing people to own M1A1 Abrams tanks?
Good grief, no.
You wouldn't?
I think that's something you couldn't carry.
Well, no, it carries you.
It carries you. Dude, I don't want somebody coming after me with an M1 Abrams tank. I mean, what do you do? That thing goes...
I'm not talking about somebody coming after you. I'm saying, should it be outlawed?
Oh, man. I don't know.
I mean, it's expensive, so not just anybody's going to go out and buy a tank.
And you can buy some Army surplus stuff, because...
Okay, we'll say Sherman. We'll just say Sherman tank, then.
Okay,
those ought to be cheaper than an Abrams, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
That's a World War II tank.
Yeah.
So should tanks be outlawed?
Okay, are we talking about the tanks that have concrete down the barrel, or tanks that
No,
are
I'm
operational?
talking about a fully operational.
Oh, man.
Because to me, in the time that the Constitution was written, the most powerful weapon out there was basically what? Not a musket, or it would be a cannon.
Yeah.
I wonder if it'd be interesting to look it up, if people at that early stage of the country were private citizens allowed to own cannons. That would be an interesting thing to find out.
I would not. There's certain implements of war that I wouldn't think normal citizens.
I mean, if you think about it, if it talks about a militia in the Second Amendment, it's actually connected.
But then you'd have people say
the militia would need to have cannons.
But then you would have people saying, "Well, there you go. It's talking about the National Guard."
Well, no, it's talking about private militias. That's not the National Guard.
But they would take that and they would say, because that's what some people try to use it as. That's the National Guard.
I've heard them say that, but that is not the people. That is the government.
Yeah.
The National Guard is still the government.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna put it out there.
Would you be in favor of people owning?
I'm in favor of it.
You would be in favor of somebody having a Sherman tank.
Any tank they want, if they can afford it, it should be legal. That's what the Constitution says.
So a bazooka.
A bazooka, yes. If you're worried about people coming after you with a tank, buy
a
bazooka. It's that easy.
Dude, now, oh man, I'm gonna be on bazooka. I'm gonna be bazooka.
See,
control.
I'm throwing it down on this.
Oh man, you're gonna make me be like the anti-Sherman control people.
Yes, Marty's
I'm anti-Sherman.
Anti-tankite.
I am an anti-tank guy. I reckon I am. I couldn't see. First of all, where are you going to drive that tank?
Well, it wouldn't be legal on roads because it would destroy the road.
Okay.
But you could drive it in your backyard all day.
My backyard's not that big.
Well, there's some people around here with some land. They could probably drive one.
Well, you could take it down to that mud bogging place.
Yeah.
Oh goodness! And yeah, I would not want people.
It'd be safe in a collision. You know, it would be safe.
It would be safe. It's probably high rating on collision.
Good
gas mileage. It would be horrible.
It gets really good gallons per mile.
You think so? There's no way.
Lots of gallons per mile.
Yeah. Oh, gallons per mile. I was about to say, good grief, man. Oh no! See all this talk, and we get to the point of talking about a tank and a bazooka, and now everything's just okay. Yeah, forget what we said about everything, right? Man, I never thought about that.
No, I'm sticking to my.
So tank you'd have somebody owning a tank. You would want to own a tank. What about an Apache helicopter?
I didn't say I could afford a tank.
Okay.
How expensive is a tank? It's probably hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million each. I don't know how much one costs. It's going to be out of your price range. But
see, the big thing was, I remember when Arnold, when he bought that Humvee. That was back before normal people didn't have Humvees. That's not the
Hummer. That's the Humvee.
And it was like, oh my goodness, that's an Army vehicle.
Well, put it like this: you're not going to afford a tank, but maybe your whole county decides that your county. And we're not talking about the county government, but let's say everybody in your county says, we want to have a county militia, we're going to pool our funds, and after, 5 years of saving up, we're going to buy a tank.
Yeah, but see,
why not?
Here's the problem, though. Nowadays, people are having problems with some of the local police departments buying the Army surplus Bradleys and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. But that's still the government. That's not the people. That's the police is still the government. Okay. I'm saying, if the police should be allowed to buy a Bradley fighting vehicle, then why can't the people?
I don't know if I want my neighbor having a tank, man.
Yeah. Well, let's come back to that one You know, if my neighbor ever, if it comes out to be a concern, your neighbors are all buying tanks and you're worried about it.
Yeah.
We'll revisit this topic. Maybe we can pool together and get some bazookas.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna. I don't think.
Or whatever those things are they're using in Ukraine right now. That thing that shoots down on top of the tank.
On top of a tank.
Yeah, we can pool up and get some of those.
Yeah. Good gracious alive! That just really that throws a wrench in it.
Threw a loop there, didn't I?
Well, as far as regular guns, you know, we do have a Second Amendment here in the United States, which is different from a lot of other countries, and many believe it is what keeps us from tyranny.
Yeah,
it's a good check on the government, but when you have guns, they're dangerous. They are very unforgiving, and so you got to be extremely careful. Never be cavalier with the gun. Always have good gun safety. Always assume a gun is loaded. Put your guns up where your kids can't get to them or grandkids.
Yeah.
Okay, but all right, that's our stab at gun control, Second Amendment. You know, we don't purport to be experts, but we're just a couple of pilgrims passing through.
And one of us we're both anti-gun control. One of us is anti-tank control.
I am anti-tank.
No, you're pro-tank control.
I'm pro-tank control. You're right. I'm pro-tank control. Okay. Well, guys, thank y'all so much for being with us. We've enjoyed it. We hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time on the Uncensored Pilgrims. And we need to let you know that the views that we express on this podcast belong to Marty McLain and Paul Price. They are our views. They do not reflect the views of anyone else. And with that said, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time on the podcast.